Hello VC, good morning. Today I want to talk about my favorite label, which is Decca, and the American distribution arm of it, London. I love everything about Decca, great conductors, great orchestras. I think the best sound out of any classical label. And maybe living stereo second, but actually the best sounding living stereos are all actually Deccas and recorded by Kenneth Wilkinson in England. And then maybe 10, 15 years later or something, the licenses reverted from RCA back to Decca. And then you see a lot of those living stereos as Treasury Series or Ace of Diamonds or whatever. So coming out of the mono era into the stereo era, the Decca team and the engineers really are the ones who pioneered and figured out how to make the best, most realistic orchestral recordings. And that whole team was fronted by Kenneth Wilkinson, who invented the Decca tree, and along with Roy Wallace and some other guys. And some of the best Deccas are recorded by Kenneth Wilkinson, but they all have a very similar sound because he was the head of all engineers on the team and basically trained everyone to do it the same way he would do it. Decca has minimal miking, but it's not super minimal, and I found a passage from Kenneth Wilkinson describing it, and I will read that to you. So he says, "You set up the tree just slightly in front of the orchestra. The two outriggers, again, one in front of the first violins, that's facing the whole orchestra, and one over the cellos. We used to have two mics on the woodwind section. They were directional mics, 56s in the early days. You'd see a mic on the timpani just to give it a little bit of clarity, and one behind the horns. If we had a harp, we'd have a mic trained on the harp. Basically, we never used too many microphones. I think they're using too many these days. So if you add that up, that's 9 microphones, and then harps, and then also if there were pianos or vocalists, that would have extra microphones. Then later, in the 70s, they started adding more microphones, and I found these couple of charts, which I'll put up. And these are from a 1971 recording of Holst the Planets by Zubin Mehta and the LA Phil in Royce Hall. And I love all of those recordings pretty much from Royce Hall with Zubin Mehta. And you can see, so there are many more microphones, so everything must have been going into 24-track mixer and then coming in, and you can see the EQ adjustments and all of that. Also, the Deccas pressed in England, the pressings are fantastic. Some of the early ones may be a little rough, some of the very early 58, 59. A little bit noisy vinyl, and I think also some of them do sound a little bit like old recordings. Like, it kind of took a couple years for it to really sink in and have like a really consistent level where every performance sounded great. And that would be into the Edition 2s in the late 60s, and then into the 70s with all of the narrowband stuff. For this video, I'm only going to show London's, just because when I'm out record shopping, when you're out shopping, London's are what you're going to see. Finding Decca SXLs out in the wild in America is pretty rare. So mostly what you will see are the London's and probably a lot of the 70s wideband ones. So I'm going to leave out the reissues and stuff, the ANALOGPHONICs, Speaker's Corner, and I'm going to leave out the old audiophile Warhorse recordings. Not that I don't love them and they don't sound fantastic. So I'm going to leave out some of these, like the Bolero, Daphnis and Chloe, Midsummer Night's Dream, this, the classic España, Iberia, three-cornered hat. Also, I would like to say that these recordings, this one in particular, this is ORG double 45. Very hard to come by and will also cost you probably 150 bucks if you can find it. And so I wanted to just show records that also cost $5, $10. Maybe some of these could get up there to 25 at the most. And I've spent my week just pulling a bunch of them off the shelf and trying to remember which ones I thought sounded great. And so I've been listening to nothing but London Deccas for a week and a half now or something. And it's really been great listening and a bunch of fun. And I pulled out records that I had almost forgotten about that sound so fantastic. And so let's get into the list. So the first one is CS 8880 Bruckner Symphony No. 6 Vienna Phil Horstein. This is 1976. I love Bruckner so much. These Horstein versions are great. I think he only did 2 and 6 on Decca. Great Bruckner conductor. Really, really enjoy this. Sonically fabulous. The next one, CS 6012. This is Rimsky-Korsakov Tale of Tsar Sultan. This is kind of like one of those audiophile bang boom showstopper kind of albums, but just sounds so fantastic. These next records are, regardless of what label or anything, some of the best sounding records in my collection, and they're just kind of a sleeper, like you would almost overlook them, I think. It starts with CS 6333 and goes upwards from there. And these are all the Haydn symphonies by Ansermet, the Orchestra Suisse Romand. They all have very similar covers. They all look very similar, these black and white pen and ink drawings. And the Decca SXL versions have very similar covers, but they're watercolors, I think, so they're colored. I think every collection needs 1 or 2 or 5 Beethoven cycles. So here's Schulte with Chicago in a box, all 9 symphonies. I think Schulte's the only person who did a complete Beethoven cycle. I know Eiserstedt did 5 and 8 and 9. I'm not exactly sure. I have a lot of these also individually, not in the box, on Decca, and these sound exactly the same. This next record, CS 6469. This is Bartok Concerto for Orchestra with Schulte in the LSO. Amazing sounding record. One of my favorite versions too of Concerto for Orchestra. I'll probably do a shootout on them between the Mercuries and the RCAs and the Deccas. This version is sonically fantastic. I think performance-wise, I might like the Reiner version better, but this is amazing, and you can find this anywhere. These next 2 records, CS 6552 and 6553, they're both Zubin Mehta LA Phil, recorded at Royce Hall. The first one is Tchaikovsky Symphony No. 4. And these are also gatefolds. They have really nice photos inside. And the second one is Schoenberg, Verklatnak, and Scriabin's Poem of Ecstasy. This is kind of a touted audiophile recording, and definitely my favorite version of Scriabin. This sounds so fantastic, these records. This next record, CS 6598, this is Britten conducting Mozart, Symphony No. 40 and the Serenata Notturna. This is the English Chamber Orchestra. This is recorded at Snape Maltings, which is this building right here. And this is an old malting factory in England where they are fermenting malt to make beer. And him and I guess his partner, Peter Pears, found this property and built it out to make a performance hall and a recording hall, and it's just beautiful inside. Any album you see by Britten that has this on the cover, there's a few of them, they all sound absolutely fantastic. And as far as Mozart Symphony 40 goes, even if you think you don't know this piece, as soon as it starts in, you will realize that you do know this piece. This next one is another 2 albums in a box. This is CSA 2220. This is Schulte in the LSO doing Mahler's Ninth. If you want to just hear the longest, most epic, heaviest piece ever, then there's Mahler's Ninth, and you should own it. Next up, CS 6190, Ensemble Orchestra Swiss Romand Stravinsky Symphony in C. Classic recording, beautiful, highly recommend this one. This is not the blue back version, this is same, but it just has a white back. Next is CS 6005. This is the Rossini Respighi La Boutique Fantasque and Ducasse Sorcerer's Apprentice with Schulte in the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. So this is ballet music, sonically incredible. Probably doesn't sound as amazing as Royal Ballet, but very, very close. Next, one of my favorite pieces of music ever, and a version which I really love. This is CS 6327. This is Kartesh and the Orchestra Swiss Romand doing Shostakovich's Fifth. Incredible record. Another one from Zubin Mehta and the LA Phil, recorded at Royce Hall. This is CS 6752. And this is Arcana, Integralis, and Ionization. And this is like a really heavy percussion album. If you're not familiar with Edgar Varese, modern, somewhat avant-garde. Everyone in the avant-garde after Edgar Varese will cite him as an influence. This record sounds incredible. This will really show you how good your system is when you crank this one up. Next, this is CS 6710. Everyone needs both the Tchaikovsky and Sibelius violin concertos. This is Kyung-Hwa Chung with the LSO, Andre Previn in the 70s. Same era as all those really great Previn LSO, his master's voice recordings. Her playing is fantastic, so sharp, so technically perfect. I have, I think, almost everything she recorded on Decca. I love all of them. This is CS 6217. This is Schulte with the Concerto Bow, Mahler's Fourth. Maybe my favorite Mahler symphony out of all of them. Not sure, it's hard to pick just one, but I love this one. This is a great version. This one's CS 6406. This is Ensemble Swiss Romand Prokofiev Symphony No. 5. Great recording. I'll just say also, not only to my own ears, but all of these, I also looked them up on Discogs and saw what the rating was, and all of these are 5 out of 5 stars or 4.83 or whatever. They're up there. Sonically, they all sound really fantastic. This is a great performance, and you're probably starting to notice that most of these are going to come from Kartesh, Anserme, Schulte. There's kind of a small group of conductors who recorded so much of the canon of classical music in these periods, and then Mehta in the 70s and a little bit of Previn. But I also like that because when you have a smaller sample size of conductors and orchestras, you really start to get a feel for the individual styles and how they like to play and interpret the pieces. And then when you start stacking them up and comparing them against other conductors from other labels, you have a pretty solid viewpoint of how one person likes to do it, so then you can see how that transfers into other people. This one, CS6191, this is probably the only one that I'm showing that might cost you a few bucks. Like you might pay somewhere between 25 and 50 for this one maybe. But this is Peter Mogg with the London Symphony. This is Mendelson Scotch Symphony. This is an absolutely fantastic performance of this. I think on Decca I also have a Bartok doing this with the LSO later on. And sonically this one is like one of the best sounding recordings ever. This next one is another Bartok. Personally, I love Bartok. I think he's one of the most rhythmically and melodically interesting composers, and definitely an influence on everyone who makes interesting avant-garde music post Bartok. And I do like to throw in some of these, also the Varese and the Bartok and some Stravinsky, because if I just stuck with the Warhorse repertoire and the audiophile classics, you know, it would be like if I was talking about jazz and I just came on and I showed you Kinda Blue and Getz Gilberto and Brubeck's Take 5, you know, and I said, well, there's jazz, you know, without digging in deeper and getting to Andrew Hill and Gresham Moncourt and all of the jazz artists I really love. So that's why I want to put in some of these people. We can delve deeper into the more weirdo side of classical music as I keep making videos. So this one is CS6407. This is Bartok's Dance Suite, 2 portraits, Opus 5, and the Romanian dances. This is Orchestra Swiss Roman with Anserme. Also really cool album cover. I think London is also, compared to Decca, known for having much uglier album covers. This one's nice. And some of these Londons I've had for a long time. Maybe, you know, I started kind of seriously collecting classical records maybe 15, almost 20 years ago. And, you know, at that period I didn't really have any money, and I would just go to Amoeba Records and little shops around LA and try and get like $1 records, $5 records. And the good thing about these Londons is in most places you can still get them for $5. And I just remember how stoked I would be to go get 5 or 6 records for $5 each and come home and listen to them. And I just love the fact that in this day of the vinyl resurgence, or whatever you want to call it, even though I think that's all dying down now, that there are still some of the best music ever recorded in the history of the world that you can still get for $5. I don't think that exists in any other genre. Next up, this one's another pretty well-known one. This is CS7251. This is Clifford Curzon playing piano, conducted by Britten. Mozart Piano Concertos 20 and 27 with the English Chamber Orchestra. Absolutely fantastic sounding record. His piano playing is so beautiful on this, and the sound and the timbre of the piano and the weight of the instrument you can really hear on this recording like you can't on some others. Sometimes the piano sounds thin or hollow, or I don't feel the body of the instrument. I hear the notes floating around, and I feel like this one really has some weight to it. This next record, this is Britten and Rostropovich Suites for Cello, CS6617. Rostropovich, definitely my favorite cellist. When I was a kid and I was going to art school, there was also an orchestra, and I had a friend who played cello in the orchestra, and he had pictures of Rostropovich all over his wall when we were like in high school. He was always in the back of my mind from that, and then when I started collecting records, I really sought out Rostropovich recordings. And him and Britten, I guess, were pretty good friends, and they made a lot of records together. I have a couple of other ones here. Britten and Rostropovich on London. This is Rostropovich doing Britten's Cello Sonata. This is on Decca. And then this one, this is an ANALOGPHONIC reissue. So this is Rostropovich and Britten doing Schubert Sonata for Arpeggione and piano and Bridges Sonata for cello and piano. This is absolutely stellar recording and reissue. I really like ANALOGPHONIC from what I've heard from them. Pretty hard to find, very expensive when you do find them. I know Chad has a few of them on there, but I'm not sure if he only is carrying right now like the violin works. I don't know, but if you can find this one, grab it. Next up, CS 6131. This is Schubert Symphony 2 and Symphony 8, the unfinished symphony, by Munchinger, Vienna Philharmonic. Great sounding record, great version of the second. I think I might have better versions of 8, but I really like this second a lot. This also is just blueback. And last, this is CS 6636, Mendelson Sextet D with Borodin Quintet in C major. This is members of Vienna Octet, so same guys who recorded Schubert's Trout that I love so much. Same group, right around the same period. And the Mendelson Sextet is just beautiful, heartbreakingly beautiful piece of work. So delicate and beautiful, amazing recording. And that's that. That's my quick look through some, like, I guess you would say like budget audiophile London records. You would be happy to get any of those albums. You could probably get all of them for, I don't know, a couple $100. Check some of them out. Happy hunting. Bye.